Hi guys, today I'll be taking a look at a popular linear switch from Akko, the Akko CS Jelly Black. Let's get started. Now, the Jelly Black is one of Akko's heaviest linear switches and is the reason why I bought them. Additionally, I had a pretty good experience with their lavender purple tactile switch and I figured I should try one of their linear ones as well. Now, in terms of pricing, these go for $12 for 45 switches on Akko's website, but you can get them on AliExpress for a bit more at £14 if you really want to. And this is what they look like when disassembled. Feel free to pause the video. Now, let's move on to the switch categories. On-center key presses are very smooth for some switches, but not so for others. There is a slight discrepancy between the smoothest and the scratchiest switch, but I reckon it's not noticeable for most people. Off-center key presses aren't too bad either, but more than half of my switches have slight binding, making them feel like weak tactile switches. Again, it's not super noticeable in normal typing. Overall, these are pretty smooth and consistent even with these issues. 7 out of 10. Now, according to the manufacturer, these switches have an actuation force of 50 grams at 1.9mm and a total travel of 4mm. Now, in terms of the actual key feel, they feel lighter than I expected. They're very similar to the Gatron Black, but these have a different spring, so it's not 100% the same, but they're very close. Now, in terms of consistency, these were consistent enough for me, but I will say that they aren't the most consistent switch when you press them off-center because they do bind slightly. And it's not a nice feeling when it happens, but they're fine most of the time. Overall, even though they are on the light side with some minor binding, these are still nicely weighted switches, although I wouldn't recommend them as a Cherry MX Black alternative because they just aren't as heavy as those. 6 out of 10. Now, sound is very much clacky, 100% clack all day, every day. I mean, they're probably the clackiest switch I've ever tested. Plus, they're installed in an aluminium case, so yeah, you can clack all day with these. However, the switch installed in my U-key has a slight ticking noise when pressed off-center. It's very minor, and I didn't even notice it until later in testing, so it's really not an issue. Overall, I like how these sound. Obviously they aren't perfect, but I like clacky sounding switches. 7 out of 10. Now take a listen and enjoy. Now, typing on these was fine. I mean, it wasn't anything too special, but it wasn't terrible either. I will say that some off-center key presses were annoying, especially when typing slowly because of the slight binding issues, but that was a relatively uncommon occurrence. Additionally, the weighting isn't to my liking as I already mentioned, but they are more comfortable to type on compared to Cherry MX Reds or Gatron Clears, so it's far from the worst. Overall, there isn't too much to say here. These switches are smooth enough, consistent enough, and affordable enough to complete most jobs. They're essentially a Toyota Corolla in switch form, so to speak. 7 out of 10. Now, when it comes to gaming, these performed very well, which I expected as I was also quite impressed with how the lavender purple performed here. However, unlike the lavender purple, which was a tactile switch, these Jelly Blacks did not suffer from any sticking issues, plus I found them to be a tad smoother as well, which is a big plus. Now, compared to similarly priced switches, I'd say these are on par with the Gatron Black and slightly below a few higher end linears, but definitely above most MX clones. Basically, these perform incredibly well for their price point. I have no idea how Akko does it, but I'm very impressed. Well done, Akko! Overall, apart from some minor issues already mentioned, I highly recommend these to those looking for an affordable, well-performing Switch. And if you're a big-time gamer, I think you're really going to appreciate these. 8 out of 10. In conclusion, these are pretty much price to performance kings. And remember, that's without any modifications. Now, that is impressive. The final score for this Switch is 35 out of 50 or 70%. So it's another big hit for Akko here. Very nice. And that's the end of the review. Next time I'll be looking at a highly rated tactile Switch. Until then, take care and goodbye.